Good morning. Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Angie Jones. I'm the head of developer relations for TBD, which is Block's newest business unit focused on decentralized technologies. Today, I want to talk about the web. All right. So the web was invented, it was meant to be decentralized, right? The ethos was anyone can publish any information to anyone in the world without the approval of any central entity. The web totally revolutionized the way that we interact. However, it's missing a key element. Y'all gonna have to fix me now. I'll be like, boom, boom, boom. Y'all got me? All right. So we're missing a key element, the identity layer. So applications that require user accounts, they have to collect our data in order to persist it with our content. Major powerhouses such as Facebook and Google, they've tried to help alleviate a lot of this by enabling us to authenticate to these services via their APIs. And while that has been super convenient, we have very little agency over our information. What if we could own and control both our identity and our data across the web? This is possible with the Decentralized Web Platform. This platform embraces the convenience of the user account model that we know in Web 2, but it also restores control back to the users, an ethos of Web 3. The harmony of these two views is what we're calling Web 5. What we're calling Web 5. Now, I promise you, whatever little joke just popped in your head, I've already heard it. So do not stop me in the hall and ask me what happened to Web 4, all right? So Web 5, it enables developers to build decentralized web apps on top of it while it abstracts away a lot of the complexity of doing so. There are 3 pillars to Web 5. All are based on open web standards. There's decentralized identifiers, verifiable credentials, and decentralized web nodes. And I'll walk you through each one of these. So decentralized identifiers. The identifiers that we know and use today, they're controlled by some intermediary, whether that be the government or a company or organization. For example, my email address is an identifier that's associated with me. I use it all over the web to authenticate and identify myself. However, I don't own it. Google does. My Twitter handle, TechGirl1908, near and dear to my heart. This is an identifier that's associated with me, but y'all, I can't keep up with who owns Twitter these days, right? So before we can realize truly decentralized applications, we first need decentralized identifiers that we own and control, and this will eliminate our dependency on applications to authenticate us. Decentralized identifiers are a W3C standard, and they're simply a long string of text that's comprised of 3 parts. We have the scheme, which is DID. We have the did method, which ultimately resolves to some sort of CRUD operation, so create, read, update, or delete. And then we have a GUID that identifies a did subject. Did subject means the person, the place, or the thing that is being identified. So these identifiers are not limited just to people. Decentralized identifiers are the only part of Web 5 that's stored on the blockchain. And it's simply this string, not anyone's actual information, because we happen to think that's pretty wild to put people's personal information on a blockchain. They follow this standard format, and because of that, they're chain agnostic. So they can be used on any of the blockchains or no blockchain at all. Here are 3 examples. The first one is a decentralized identifier that's anchored on Bitcoin. The second one is on Ethereum. And the final one is anchored on the web. It's not using blockchain. So because your identifier is anchored on-chain, but your information is off-chain, the DID works as a URI that points to a DID document, which holds that information. Okay? The DID document is typically stored on a decentralized storage system such as IPFS. So you can think of this as like a key-value pair where the DID is the key, the document is the value. The document is a JSON file, and it contains information on how to interact with a DID subject. So it'll have things like the DID subject's public keys, as well as authentication and verification methods. All right? So that covers decentralized identifiers. The next component of Web 5 is verifiable credentials. Verifiable credentials are also a W3C standard. They work hand in hand with decentralized identifiers to enable trustless interactions, meaning 2 parties don't need to know or trust one another in order to engage. But claims that are made about a DID subject can be cryptographically verified. Let me show you an example. So let's say that Alice wants to apply for a loan and the lender needs to verify her employment. So her employer, Acme, can issue a cryptographically signed, verifiable credential, which would then be stored in Alice's wallet. Okay? I want to double click inside that credential. I want you to see what's in here. So we have the issuer as Acme. We have the subject as Alice. More specifically, we have the decentralized identifiers for both Acme and Alice. And then we have the claims that the issuer is making about the subject. So Acme is saying, yes, this person's full name is Alice Smith. Her salary is $120,000. And then they've cryptographically signed this credential. All right? That's all the information that's needed, so that's all that's provided. Once the lender requests that proof of employment, Alice can then present her credential to the lender. Now remember, the lender doesn't know or trust Alice. However, they do consider Acme a trustworthy entity, and therefore, trust is extended to Alice in this case. So this is a nice, easy, machine-readable way to verify claims across the web. The last pillar of Web 5 is decentralized web nodes. So today, centralized entities act as our data stores. Our applications, they hold our content, they hold our preferences, and we have very little control. Now, decentralized web nodes changes this. It enables us to decouple our data from the apps that we use. Blue Sky is a great example of this. So Blue Sky is a decentralized version of Twitter, but instead of them holding your connections and your tweets, that stuff is stored with you. What this means is now your data is portable. You can bring it with you wherever you're going, right? So if you wanted to sign up for decentralized Instagram or decentralized TikTok, I see a lot of y'all migrating to Mastodon. You can take this with you. What if you didn't have to start over? What if you aren't saying, oh, where are all my friends? Here's my handle. Y'all follow me over here. But you could plug it right in, and all of your people are right there, your content as well. Decentralized web nodes are capable of holding both public as well as encrypted data. All right? So in the case of Blue Sky, things like your tweets, your connections, you would want this to be public. Things like your DMs, you would want to be encrypted. Decentralized web nodes also do not live on the blockchain because no one wants their tweets and their DMs on a public immutable ledger. All right? So instead, you host it locally, and you can replicate it to multiple devices and cloud instances, right? Now, this is definitely a paradigm shift, but it's not a total overhaul of the web that we already know. You can think of it like a progressive web app, but decentralized web apps would add a decentralized web node SDK to the tech stack. In that way, applications are free to truly go serverless because they no longer need to store your information on their end. Now, the decentralized web nodes are associated with your decentralized identifiers, and that is listed in that DID document that I talked about. So here's a section here that lists service endpoints, and these are URIs to Alice's web node. Given an application has the URI to a web node, they can send the request for data. So in this request, they're sending this HTTP request, and they're requesting all of the objects that follow the social media posting schema. So the objects inside of the web node are JSON objects that follow some semantic type. And this is how we make sure that the data is interoperable between multiple applications, right? So if they ask Alice for all of her objects that follow the social media posting schema, the ones that are public will be automatically returned. The ones that are encrypted, Alice would have to give explicit access to those if she chooses. All right, so all of this is very complicated, especially for non-technical users. As I often remind builders in the space, your average user is not requesting decentralization as a feature, right? So we need an easy way to manage all of this while making decentralization and implementation detailed. So we're building an identity wallet. And with this wallet, you'll be able to manage things like your decentralized identifiers in the context in which they're used, your verifiable credentials, and your content within your web nodes, as well as your authorizations and verification. Now, Web 5 enables developers to build decentralized web apps on top of it. The individual components of Web 5, again, are all open standards, so they don't belong to any one company. What my team TBD is doing is implementing these open standards, aggregating them together to make the Web 5 platform. It's open source, so you're free to use this as your foundational layer and focus your attention on what you care about, which is your app. Speaking of apps, the sky is the limit to what types of apps can be built on this foundation, but I've included a couple of examples just to give you some ideas. So let's say that Alice is a Spotify user, and she's given Spotify write access to her web nodes. So again, this is decentralized Spotify. They've gone serverless. So they're writing everything that she's doing to her web node. So when she makes a new playlist, when she faves a song, maybe some of her preferences with the app are being written to her web node. And then let's say Alice wants to try Tidal out. She's heard some good things about them. They pay their artists more. She wants to check them out. She can do so very easily by just giving Tidal read access to her web node, and they can read everything that has been placed there from Spotify. Notice there we're using a music playlist schema, so they can easily pull those objects. And now Alice is able to use Tidal right out of the box. Managing the medical records is a scenario that's near and dear to me. Within the last 5 years, I have moved 3 different states, meaning I need to get new doctors and things like that. That is a pain to do, right? So with this technology, Alice can hold all of her medical records herself. As she's going to her primary care provider, her dentist, her gynecologist, and all of these various specialists, she doesn't have to try to call all of the old ones and have them fax over data to the new ones, all out of her control, right? Instead, this stuff can be hosted in her web nodes, and she can grant access or reject access to any of the doctors that she chooses to. All right? So those are just a couple of examples of what's possible with Web 5. The sky is the limit. once we have the web decentralized the way it was always intended to be. All right. If you want to know more information about Web 5, check us out at tbd.website. Here's a QR code for that. We have our Discord. You want to chat about it. You have questions, ideas. We would love to hear them. You want to contribute or check out the code base. We are on GitHub. Also, if you want to work on decentralized technologies more formally, we do have some job postings listed there as well. If you're a company, you're trying to solve some of these same challenges, or you want to collaborate, we're down for that as well. Thank you all so much. The future is TBD.